business, she goes around and helps other people, with their businesses. And then I forget what the gentleman, what his background is. But there's another company that we work with in St. Louis that has some diversity. But this is so much tied into our whole education system here in the United States that we could also go off on a tangent, I believe, that, so none said, you're all nodding, so we all know what this is about. But I believe, and we have the company in St. Louis that I won't mention, that has all white men. We have said to them, next year we want to see diversity on this board. We want to see different people in this annual report that we can vote on, because this is a start. And there is no reason why you cannot begin to educate our young African American men and women in this field. And I'm not going to even mention the field. I'll tell you all later if you want to know. But so this is what the annual meeting is about.
That's a publicly held corporation, though, right?
Yes, of course it is.
Well, there's no reason their name can't be public then. They're a publicly held corporation.
So things go. So anyway, some other victories that have happened just recently with other ICCR members is that Shell Oil actually said that they have a problem with greenhouse gas emissions, and they're going to do something about it.
Good.
So that's amazing. Wendy's has recently said they will stop putting sugary sodas on the kids' menu. So when you go to Wendy's, check it out. Probably it'll take them 6 months or whatever, to do that. But go to your Wendy's, if you ever go to Wendy's, and say, oh, I'm so glad to hear that you're not putting Pepsi and Coke on the kids' menu anymore. And this was because of ICCR members. And also another group that's working on this sugary issue of diabetes in children is a group called Moms Rising. So that's their main focus is children's health. And they're working on all of the fast food companies to do the same thing. All right, so we've talked about dialogue, we've talked about shareholder proposals, and the last thing is, if the company is still refusing to do any sort of movement, we divest. And recently, some of the larger pension funds, I think the Methodist in particular, they have divested of all their fossil fuel companies. They just felt it was not working. And so that's just an example of the final thing. And probably some of you heard of 350.org and the whole divestment movement on college campuses. Has Missouri U done much? That's the thing, right here in Missouri, we don't have much going on at all with that. Apparently the East Coast is big and the West Coast, but anyway. But, it is a last opportunity.
How much money does any shareholder group need to have, though, in order for the divestment to really mean anything to a large corporation?
Well, right, of course, that depends on the corporation.
That's why you need a movement.
You need a movement of divesting. The other thing that I point out with divestment, and 350.org does not point this out, I don't think, is that if we were to divest, and like the Methodists did, they also wrote a letter to the company and said, we have X number of shares, this is why we're divesting. Otherwise, the company doesn't even know. Somebody else is going to buy those shares. Yeah, it's just bookkeeping, and it doesn't make any difference. So you have to let your word be out there to the company itself why you're divesting. We tried to talk to you. Climate change is imminent. We feel that this is, a very, very important thing. We want you to diversify. We want you to go faster. In other words, get into this quickly. And, as you probably are aware, the coal companies are suffering today. All right, so, ready to move on. All right, so why should the companies talk to us? They're going to save dollars if they are going into better environmental and social practices. They're going to be more proactive. They won't have as much litigation. They won't have reputational fallout in the newspaper. They won't have people at their shareholder meetings yelling at them, or, well, not yelling, but excoriating them. Yeah, well, signs are outside. So they get into this because they will save money. Another reason is that employees become more motivated. When they see sustainable practices, employees are motivated. And companies have told us that young people want environmental, social responsibility. They want to belong to something that is really for the future. And Boeing especially has gotten into this whole thing. And Boeing has some good programs, environmental and social issues. And they say, well, we can't get, talented young people unless we're talking about this and doing it. Another reason, better reputation. Another one is they like the fact that we come to them with suggestions. More than just finger shaking, don't do this, why are you doing this? We come with suggestions. And then finally, when they really do get enough of the compliance and the disclosure, the transparency, and the verification, we will leave them alone. So then they say, whew, they are gone. Now, again, that is the longest part of this whole process. Some members of ICCR have been working with ExxonMobil for 25 years. They've gotten them to move a little bit. They're doing biomass, every year they move a little bit ahead, but it does take constant vigilance and being on their back, so to speak. Walmart is another company that ICCR members have been involved with for probably 25 years. Every time there's a turnover in the CEO, they start all over again, sort of, and, but they just got Walmart to raise those wages, 90 cents an hour, big deal. They're doing some environmental stuff, organic in their stores, and, better.
Panels on the roofs.
Yeah, so things like that, if you don't keep coming back, they'll say, oh, God, they're leaving us alone. Now, some companies would do that, but some really do see the value. Well, we're saving electricity, putting the solar panels out there,
Maybe at
saving
least
the lighting.
they see the value after they've implemented it. Surely they see that they use less, it costs them less.
Yeah, yeah. Reputational risk. I mean, we know a lot of people that, sort of boycott Walmart because of their employee relationships, their lack of benefits, that sort of thing. So, this is all part of being a savvy consumer, too. So, all right. Finally, the tools of the trade we use. There's some very great United Nations documents out there on human rights, human right to water, which is very recent. There is the CEO water mandate. Just Google it. Monsanto has signed on. And when they sign on to that, they have to commit to working with local indigenous peoples. they have to commit to working with NGOs and to governments. Those are three big, and also to other corporations. So that is a big challenge. And in June of 2014, Monsanto signed on to the CEO water mandate. This is what we brought up at the annual meeting in January, was thank you for doing that. We're really pleased with, what your water team has done so far on the reporting with the consumption and all that. Thank you for signing on to the CEO water mandate. You have really committed to being a leader with other seed companies in this issue. And we want to, we'll be dialoguing with you in 2015 about this progress that you're making. So, so those are sort of our tools of the trade. The United Nations has some great documents. Another thing you might hear about in the shareholder speak is the Global Reporting Initiative, and that's something you can Google. That's a standard, have you heard of it? It's a standard, it's a standard test. Kids get a standard test, you have to color in the bubble. Well, the Global Reporting Initiative is a standard test. It asks questions like, what is your total water consumption in the last year? What is your total water consumption per each watershed, facility? Then it goes on to your recycling totals, et cetera, et cetera. The Global Reporting Initiative has a lot of questions about water, but it also talks about your relationship with indigenous peoples. When you're setting up a new place, how does that work? What are you doing? How many meetings are you having? With whom are you having meetings? We want it documented. It's a pretty strenuous test. It's on environmental, it's on biodiversity practices, on their human rights, their social impacts, as well as their governance, how they govern. And mostly the governance questions on the Global Reporting Initiative are related to how does the board find out your environmental practices and your impacts? How does that filter up to the board and to the executive team, that sort of thing? Who reports to who and how does it get back down? So that's the governance type question, but they have to answer that too. So that's the GRI, it's a great little standard.
On this Global Reporting Initiative, are there a bunch of global nonprofits behind that?
Yeah.
Behind the initiative?
It's the United Nations.
Oh, it's the United Nations, okay.
And there's the Principles for Responsible Investing, which also was crafted by members of the United Nations and financial institutions also. So those two groups came together.
Principles of
Responsible Investment, PRI.
Okay.
Yeah, they're under the United Nations umbrella. And the thing is with the Global Reporting Initiative, it's their watchdog group is a nonprofit group that checks back and forth with them and make sure that companies they kind of evaluate how the company is doing the standardized testing and who's doing it for them, that sort of thing. So there's a system of checks and balances there. Kind of complicated. Okay, so that's kind of the tools of our trade. Okay. I'll just throw out one more point, and that is young people who are in college or in high school to think about this as a career path for them. A lot of investment companies today are hiring college grads to do this kind of work. So you can get a job with Morgan Stanley and do ESG work, environmental, social, and governance work. You can be the person in Morgan Stanley that follows these issues and plugs in investors into the companies that they want to be invested in. That's when we're going back to these positive screens idea or negative screens again. So the kind of diplomas or, majors that students would need would be, environmental science major, financial major, even political science, lawyers. So those are, you don't have to necessarily go into investment as such, although of course that would be a great benefit too. But they're hiring all kinds of backgrounds to be able to do this work. So please, let this be known around here, the college campuses. I always try to end with that because we want more people on these boards that can be the innovators to